Okay, thank you, Lara. There was a question. I have a couple questions, but one came in from Holly. Are you aware of the urban or municipal soil health policies in place?
I don't know, Holly, if you mean like specific ones or like general ones, but that's a really good point that it's not just about state and federal. I forgot to mention that local, a lot of things happen on the local level. So urban policies for urban agriculture, yeah, municipal policies can make a difference. And if you have specifics of those that you want to share, there's like all kinds of great there's all kinds of great things going on at that level.
So I have a question, Lara. Which state do you feel like has the best state policy? I mean, I see Maryland has the highest percent acres, but which one has an ideal policy to influence or encourage the use of like covers and soil health practices?
You know, that's a tough question, and I think you could rate best in different ways. When I think about soil health, I think it's not just about funding practices that are good for soil health, but it's about doing what's best overall for farmers to be able to be empowered and have control of their management decisions. I think that is one of the best and most important things for soil health. And I see a lot of good policies in New England and Vermont of just things that are kind of generally giving farmers more assistance, getting the training and the marketing resource they need. So, like, I know Vermont has some good policies there. I'm also partial to Iowa just because of the amount of their spending on water quality, related to soil health, is more than other Midwestern states. So, but there are so many states doing a lot on soil health right now. When I look at a best policy, I'm looking at something that puts some money with it and that is maybe a little bit holistic to meeting the needs of farmers more generally. So I look for those two things.
Thank you. There's a couple more questions come into the chat from Nick. Are you aware of the Citizens Climate Lobby? And if so, can you elaborate on how this organization can influence policy?
Yeah, I'm very aware of Citizens Climate Policy. My cousin is a participant in the Arizona chapter, and I have a friend who's really big at in the USDA chapter. So, from my understanding, CCL is grassroots organizations that work on climate policy at the local level, and then kind of come together to create change in federal policy. Like I know Citizens Climate Lobby advocated for, was it a carbon tax or something not too long ago at the federal level. So I think it's a great model for starting things on the local, but then kind of coming together for collective power to make national level change. So yeah, definitely good group.
Okay, here's one from Kelly, kind of a comment as much as a question. It just jumped down below on me. Is Minnesota so very low in adoption of soil health practices that it doesn't merit being listed? I believe there's progress being made there.
Oh my goodness, there are 50 states and every single one is doing something great. So if there are ones that I left out, it's just due to limited times in the presentation. Minnesota is, let's see, I don't know if it was on that 10 list. Let me see if I can go forward. So that is just based on those list of policy, those are just based on the USDA census numbers. And if I pulled up my full Excel spreadsheet, I could see how much farther list Minnesota was on the where it placed in terms of adoption. But there are some good things going on in Minnesota. There's some kind of an agricultural water quality incentives, kind of a holistic program that pays farmers for doing a holistic management program on their farm for water quality. And that includes a lot of soil health work. That's one that I know of.
Okay, Dan has a question. If the trend continues decades down the road, we'll have just a few farms per county and hundreds of thousands of acres each. This has all kinds of implications for food security, variety and soil health. What sort of policy could be introduced to increase the number of farms and the number of farmers who perhaps are first-time farmers, not to mention the sustainability of small towns?
Yeah. So getting back to what I was saying before about soil health not just being about paying for acres and practices, but supporting the overall needs of farmers, protecting farmland and ensuring that future generations of farmers can get into have management of their land, that's really important for soil health. And one thing I didn't talk about was like farmland protection policies that keep farmland from falling into development and keep it in the hands of farmers. There's a lot of other things that affect that. Speaking of municipal codes, having codes that have favorable rent and, you know, that protect the property taxes of farmers, and that, you know, like those kinds of things on the municipal level are really important, so that farmers don't have to just sell. And then another thing I didn't really talk about are issues of racial equity and what farmers have access to land. A large percent of our land is owned by white people in the US, up to 98%. So I think having more full participation in farm policy in the future is going to require looking at how, as a country, we've discriminated in our farm policy and what we can do to increase access and make access to farmland more equitable for young and beginning farmers and farmers who are maybe didn't inherit land from ancestors, which is probably predominantly going to be white farmers in the U.S.
Hey, Lara, I got a question, and I think you kind of tipped your hand a little bit. If you could pick one thing or one or two big things that are really going to move the needle for the adoption of soil health practices from a policy standpoint, what would they be?
Well, crop insurance, I wouldn't have spent so much time going over that if I didn't think it was really, really important, because so many farmers, particularly in the Midwest, use crop insurance. And if that gets in the way of diversification of crop rotations and it gets in the way of good soil health practices on the land, it's essential that that program is harnessed and transitioned towards better uses. If I could pick another thing, it's really tricky, but I would think a transition to regenerative agriculture. I didn't talk about the term regenerative and what that means, but I feel it's more than just good soil health. It's also that kind of empowerment of farmers, kind of anti-consolidation, sort of getting more power into individual farmers and going against consolidation. So some type of policy that works on transition and anti-consolidation law, I would say, would be really important.
So if you talk crop insurance, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and just a sense of the policymakers who you work with. You mentioned about the percentages of what the farmer pays. What would be a fair percentage that you could think could move the needle a little bit, as far as the percentage the farmers pays versus the subsidized amount?
Yeah, and I guess from the way I did this slide, I really talked about that, but really increasing the percent that the farmer pays, I think, is not the most important part. I think it's changing some of the ways that it's structured. Like, there's a real focus on yield within the crop insurance program, and yield isn't necessarily the best way to measure profitability or the success of a farm. So I would change some of our yield-based policies with crop insurance and move them towards like profit-based, like the whole farm revenue protection program. For subsidies, rather than saying we're not going to cover the cost of the subsidy, because the reason those subsidies are so high is before that farmers didn't participate. And what would happen is lawmakers would make these big disaster payments whenever something bad happened. And that's why lawmakers in Capitol Hill will be like fierce defenders of the crop insurance program. So it's more politically tenable to make those subsidies dependent on good soil health practices. So basically, you get a larger percent of the subsidy if you're doing things that will reduce your risk over time through good soil health.